Okay, so one question I would have is, and you're the first Buddhist that has ever even asked a question. My initial question or critique would be, it seems to me that those really all the Far Eastern religions kind of rely on an absolute that is basically impersonal, and the problem with an impersonal absolute would be that reality basically becomes either meaningless, nihilistic, or an illusion. And I'm just concerned that if we went that route, then it seems like knowledge would become impossible, or we would fall into the situation that a lot of Far Eastern religions do, which is that knowledge is fundamentally contradictory.
I think Buddhism, I mean, there's different types of Buddhism, but
Right.
my understanding is that they appear nihilistic and impersonal, but I think that was just an inbuilt mechanism to avoid excesses of what they were trying to replace, which was kind of early Hindu kind of traditions that fell into kind of idol worship, kind of attachments to rule and ritual. So people would just kind of painting themselves blue and going to temples and things, and thinking that was accessing divinity. And I think that the context of the Buddha's time is that he saw the dangers of that. So he very much kind of strayed away from any personification or deification. And I think his thing was, well, have a look and see for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what you're going to find, but if you follow my instruction and my suggestion, then you find out what that is for yourself. And so you hear of Buddhist monks and people that have followed the tradition that attain realizations, and in their words, I don't hear their words as, they're not kind of saying, oh, it's just a void and there's nothing there, and it's cold and selfless, and they're often full of great compassion and wisdom. But I do see why people get that idea, but I think that, like I say, goes back to the historical context of the Buddhist time.
Okay, let me give an example of a question that would be more precise. So, do you think that the world that's out there, that reality, do you think it's fundamentally teleological or disteleological? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I think there's an instinctive nature to. I don't know if you're aware of Bernardo Kastrup?
No.
Do you know this guy? Okay. I think the closest analogy would be someone like Schopenhauer. About Schopenhauer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know
world as will and representation.
The idea of the will, which is kind of quite instinctive. It's quite kind of it's not really teleological in the Christian sense. It's kind of like a striving, searching God or presence that's kind of fumbling around, and through humanity it kind of awakes to itself. But it's not that kind of, you were saying earlier about with the Trinity, it's certainly not that kind of pre-existing attributes and qualities that are there before creation. So it's definitely
so you're saying that
in contrast to that.
So God is a kind of process. He's in process philosophy.
Yeah.
How do you know that? How do you know that to be the case?
Well, I think that this goes to the kind of another split in ideologies. So I think in Buddhism and Eastern traditions, God is your consciousness. It's you introspect, and in your own awareness, you find that's your knowledge into God. Is the mystical approach. It's through introspection and personal insight.
So God is literally identical to my own consciousness?
Yeah, your kind of like your naked awareness, your ability to know, to perceive.
Okay.
That's your Bible in a way, for if you want to use that analogy.
Okay.
That you find what God is through knowing yourself.
Okay. Is God identical to your consciousness as well?
Well, in the Buddhist sense, there isn't a self, so there's no I. There's no kind of me individual. There is the universal consciousness that we all are. So I wouldn't kind of claim that as for me as an individual. I think to the extent that I access it, I access you and everyone else.
Okay, but you said everyone else. That would presuppose that there are other beings.
Yeah. Well, it's the dissociation. So this is the kind of I mentioned Bernardo Kastrup. So he speaks about dissociated self. So there's a unitary self, but it's a bit like DID, like dissociative disorders. The analogy he uses. So it's a self that partitions through a process that's analogous to DID.
Mm-hmm. So if you're in this world interacting with me and other people, and the selves that are you're saying are basically fractured versions of the one, don't you see that this would fall into the same problems I was mentioning about Platonism earlier? Because we aren't the super self. How do you know that there is a super self?
It's a kind of Cartesian thing, I think. It's this idea that if I deny everything else, what can I not deny? What's the one thing that rests
but you know that
any content of consciousness is consciousness itself.
You know that the cogito is in multiple ways fallacious, right?
Yeah, the way it's interpreted in different ways by different people, isn't it?
Well, the way that it's stated by Descartes is fallacious, objectively speaking, right? I mean, in other words, to say that I think, therefore I exist is, number one, a non sequitur. The fact that there's thinking occurring doesn't actually give you metaphysical content. And also it assumes things that have not been questioned, like time determination. So if Descartes says there's an occurrence or occurring, that presupposes time determination. But that was something that was supposed to be questioned, right? But he didn't. It also presupposes linguistic philosophy, which Descartes didn't question at that time either. So my point is just simply that I don't understand Buddhism the way you do or as deep as you do, but what I hear from you seems to, again, just sort of echo metaphysical problems that I was outlining earlier in relationship to Platonism or to dualism. So any dualistic philosophy is going to have a problem of relating the things that are totally transcendent or non-dualistic to the realm of the here and the now, which is the opposite of that stuff. And so how do you know that there's a super self or a super consciousness if you only interact with the flux changing illusory consciousnesses that are fractured in the here and the now?
Well, I don't, do I? I kind of...
So there's not you don't have a way to know that God is identical to the process of consciousness.
Yeah, but I could say the same thing to you. How do you know there's this transcendent deity, loving deity that's kind of overseeing everything?
Well, I would make a transcendental argument and subject the worldview to the same critique that I'm subjecting your worldview to, and that is the argument, transcendental argument. You know, Christian metaphysics makes sense because there is a personal God who creates the world. The world has purpose. There are real distinctions in beings. The world is an illusion. We're not fractured parts of the one. I avoid the problems of Platonism, and I don't see how what you're saying avoids the basic problems of Platonism. How do you know that ultimate reality is pure awareness? On what basis do you know this?
Because it's the only thing I can doubt. Everything else I can even doubt my own thinking. I can doubt all my perceptions, but I can't doubt that there is knowing, or there is a capacity to know. Okay. I can't doubt that.
When you say, I mean, this is a version of a Descartes type of argument, so I see where you're going with this.
Yes, it's related. Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Do you not understand?
It's not identical.
Do you not understand that proposition assumes all kinds of metaphysical things? It assumes that language has meaning.
Well, everything does. Anything you can say does.
Your goal was to strip away all the things that you think you know. And I'm saying that the same way that I critique Descartes' cogito, you haven't actually done that. So you're still assuming multiple things that are metaphysically the case, epistemically the case, linguistically the case. So you haven't actually done what you said you were going to do. Okay. So it doesn't function as an argument to prove the metaphysical claim that ultimate reality is consciousness in process.
the other
Okay,
thing
well then it doesn't function as an argument.
This is my caveat: is that I cannot convince anyone or prove anything using language. I think that this is the other difference with Eastern religions, is that you can go away onto a mountaintop, and where you can come to answers, whereas maybe in Western Christian tradition, it's more about it's something that can be codified and shared with language, and that's not my understanding.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat back this sentence. I'm not trying to be mean to you. Don't get your feelings hurt.
No, go.
It's an honest question. You said, I cannot convince or prove anything with language. Does that sentence itself use language and attempt to prove anything? Okay, it does. That's a sentence, and it is making an argument. It's making a claim.
It's claiming the limitations of my of language.
Yeah, but it's self-refuting because it's a sentence that's attempting to convince or argue something using language.
Yeah.
Okay, so your fundamental argument is self-refuting, using language to try to make an argument that language can't prove anything.
Yeah, you're right.
So
you're right.
Buddhism doesn't work. When you say when you say will, when you say consciousness, when you say searching, working itself out, these are all metaphysical claims. And the point of let's strip all that away and boil it down to basics philosophy, which is what I'm fine with doing, questioning it all the way down to the basic assumptions. Those are all things that you haven't questioned, because those are metaphysical claims. And if we're going to make these grand metaphysical claims, we're going to have to start from the basics and build up to that. But we haven't got any place to even set our foot down. We need something to start with. But that would be my critique of that approach. So that would be why I think Christianity is a better way to ground metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology.